Hey, Liz, welcome to the Talent Development Hot Seat.
It's good to be here. When I heard this name, Andy, the talent development hot seat, it reminded me of my job at Oracle for about a dozen years. I felt like I was in the talent development hot seat, and it's been a few years since I've been there, so I'm feeling the heat.
Oh, nice. All right. Well, we're going to bring the heat today. And I'm just so excited to have you on. We met briefly many years ago, as we talked about, and I've been following your work and a big fan of your book and your work for the last few years. And of course, I facilitate a simulation based on the book Multipliers. And so when I reached out, I was just so excited and grateful when you said you would be willing to come on the show and share some of your wisdom. So let's start with a little bit of your background, if you wouldn't mind, for people that are not familiar with your story. How did you get to where you are today?
It's funny. I went on like an absolute circular path to get here. And what is that quote? It's like something, and at the end of all our journey, we will come to where we began and know it for the first time. It's a T.S. Eliot quote, but I feel like I have gone on this wonderful circular journey to get to do what I've always wanted to do, but to know it. And, I came out of college and I wanted to go, I don't know what prompted this, but I wanted to teach management. I came out of business school and I actually approached a company, Zanger Miller. They were kind of one of the preeminent management training companies at the time. And I got on my resume and somehow I got to the president and I told him, I want to be one of your management trainers. And Ed Musselwhite is his name. And he's like, you seem great, but maybe you'll be a better management trainer if you get some management experience. Like, he used some nice words,
Yeah.
but that's really what I wanted to do. But I could see that first of all, I could see that there was a closed door, for me on this opportunity. And so I took, for me, what was very much a consolation prize job. I went to work for Oracle, this, young maverick software company. And I took a job in education. It was a job in talent development, actually. And I was doing training and I was actually teaching software programming. And when I was actually still quite young, maybe 24, 25 years old, they said, hey, we need someone to manage training for the company. And Oracle's growing, they're doubling every year. And I actually didn't want the job. I liked teaching. I like training, even though I was training on software, which honestly I was not enamored with. I really loved the learning process and I didn't want the management job. And there were actually other people in the group who wanted it. I didn't want it, but they offered it to me. And I remember Ed's word, like, maybe you'll be a better trainer someday if you actually know what leadership and management is. And so I took that job and I started up Oracle University and I led the company's, I guess what we would call the talent development or talent management function today. I think we called it like the Global Human Resource Development Organization. So I spent the first 17 years of my career leading the talent management function. And it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I left the corporate world and started my work that I do now really as a management researcher and an author. And then here's a little bit of a funny slap in the face. So a couple of years ago, ATD, I think we all know who ATD is, development. They told me that they were giving me this award. It was like a really cool award. It's the Champion of Talent Award.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I read about this award and, the list of people who've gotten this award is kind of a really impressive list of people. Yeah. And they said, this is an award that we give out every year to someone outside of our industry who's made a big impact for talent. And so these are like, Salman Khan started Khan Academy, Chris Anderson, who started up TED, and then me. And I'm like, well, I appreciate the word, but do you know, I am not from outside of this industry. These are my people.
Yeah.
I am of this tribe. And I said, well, clearly this award is an indication that I'm a has-been in the talent development world. That I'm considered, I don't know, just like a thought leader outside of the industry. I feel very much in that industry.
You feel like you're in the industry, but for all intents and purposes, you're on the outside selling to the inside like me, right?
I suppose. Yeah. I just had never seen myself that way.
Yeah. Well, because you spent so much time on the inside, you know what it's like. You have the empathy, you have that experience, you have the connections. And my perspective would be that everything you've done throughout your career since then is to help the people on the inside, that you still feel like you're there. Is that fair to
Well, I
say?
do. And I think the experience has given me, a lot of experience with what it's like to lead, to have to hire, to fire, to outsource, to move jobs overseas, to kill programs that people have put their heart and soul into. Like, I've had to do all that hard, gunky work, not just the glamorous, fun part of running a learning function, but it's also given me a lot of empathy for people who organize conferences. And, I do a lot of speaking,
Mhm.
and I go to a lot of conferences, and I don't know if I will ever forget like what it's like to be on the inside and to be hiring a professor or an author or some luminary to come in and to put them on a stage and say, we're going to give you the opportunity to educate our management ranks, and what an incredible risk they take by giving some Yahoo a microphone. And I think about that all the time. Like, wow, people are really taking a risk. Some people are putting their career on the line when they invite you to come
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
and to teach or to speak. And so that's when I have a lot of empathy for what
Mm.
that's like
Right. Because
on the other side.
yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, that's going to take you further, in connecting with all the people that you know. And of course, you're really well connected and highly regarded and admired across talent development. Now, I've been running this podcast now for about 8 months. I've interviewed over 50 talent leaders, and I always ask people for,
Whoa. Well, that's amazing.
yeah. Well, thank you. And I was going to say that I always ask people for a book recommendation, and one of the top books that I hear among all books is Multipliers by Liz Wiseman. Probably that and Mindset by Carol Dweck are probably the top two books that I hear recommended across the industry, and that authors or speakers that people are familiar with or will say, "Oh, I heard Liz Wiseman speak. It was amazing. I'm so excited that you're having her on the podcast." So it's just an honor to get you on here.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. And, I've been a long admirer of Carol's work. We live probably a couple miles from
Mm.
each other. I'm just right here in the shadows of Stanford. And yeah, I've really learned a lot from her work.
Yeah, well, her work has had a big impact on me, not only in business, but especially as a parent as well. So when I read that book, mindset completely shifted. And I know you mentioned it in your book, Multipliers, as well, and as sort of the conjunction where managers who are essentially diminishers have more of a fixed mindset. They believe intelligence is static and is not going to change, and that they need to be the smartest person in the room, versus the multiplier who have more of a growth mindset and believe that intelligence can change, and that you can draw intelligence out of different people and even bring or convince them to use more than they even knew they had.
Yeah, I think, Carol has told me her perspective on this. And um, it's funny, Carol read the book Multipliers, and I asked her what she thought and if she would be willing to write an endorsement. She's just like, I love the book. And that was all she said. I'm like, well, tell me more.
What else? Yeah.
and I'm like, well, what is it about it? And she's like, well, because essentially what you've done is explore like what happens in an organization when the leader of the team is operating with a growth mindset. And I had never set out to do that per se, but in essence, it really is kind of this premise, which is, how do you lead when you really hold a deep belief, not only that you can learn and grow and figure things out, because that's the essence of the mindset work. It's just what happens with students and people, adults, when they hold that belief. But what happens on a team when you actually think that the people you work with are smart and will figure it out? Like, what does it cause you to naturally do? Because I grew up in the talent world and in the training world, I'm and I am the daughter of a behavioralist.
Mm.
My mom was a special education teacher and principal, and I joke with my mom that if I ever write her life story, it will be called Flashcards and M&Ms.
Hmm.
And because my mom like believed that everything could be solved with like behavioral conditioning, like every
Yeah.
problem that I've ever had with any of my kids, my mom's like, okay, here's Elizabeth, here's what you need to do. She didn't call me Liz, she calls me Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, here's what you need to do. You need to get a jar of M&Ms and
Yeah.
a set of flashcards. And on the flashcards, describe the behavior, that you're looking for, and then reinforce it with an M&M. And it always worked until the jar of M&Ms ran out.
Yeah.
But so I have this strong orientation that like, it's about behavior. It's about what leaders do. We train for skills and behavior. We skill up a workforce. And I think one of the things I haven't replaced that understanding or orientation, but I've added to it is that if you don't get the mindsets right, there's no amount of behavioral training, of reinforcement, of tools, of like what are now our electronic versions of flashcards.
Right.
All of these reinforcement systems and job aids, like none of that works if you're not operating from the right core belief set. And in many ways, that's far more powerful.
Yeah.
So get the thinking right. And, we sort of wiggle our way into the right behavior.
Right. Yeah.
That's not always true.
Interesting.
But over time, I think, like, even if someone is well-trained in multiplier ways of leading, but they're still operating under diminishing assumptions, you know what? They're going to find their way back to diminishing behavior. Sure. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
Like the end of the quarter will come, a crisis will hit, and they will snap right back to the things that they did based on those beliefs. And I think over time, I don't think we just float into good behavior unintentionally, but if we keep our thinking right and square, I think over time our behavior catches up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you talk in the book, of course, about the idea of accidental diminishers, and that most people don't come to work planning to diminish their people or to be a bad manager, right? They're not that many nefarious managers out there who are trying to do evil, but there are a lot of managers who are doing it anyway because
who are evil.
Yeah, who are or just bad managers, right? And they're not realizing how much of an impact they have on their people who they want to do good work, right? The people want to do good work. And if I could even just read a quote from your book that I think sets all of this up, which is that people across cultures, industries, companies, et cetera, come to work every day hoping to be well utilized, not by being given more work, but through the recognition that they are capable of contributing in significant ways and doing progressively more challenging work. People want to do good work, and there's a lot of people out there diminishing them, not on purpose, but how. I guess the big question is going to be, how do we help more managers stop doing that?
Yeah, and and even before we go there, I think the thing that really struck me was not only that most of the diminishing that's happening in our workplaces is coming from the accidental diminisher. Most people are completely unaware of their diminishing impact. I think the thing that struck me, and it still continues to blow my mind in some ways, is that the crater that's created by the accidental diminisher tends to be as deep as the crater that's created by the tyrannical narcissistic bully. Now, if someone is like a truly an intended diminisher, I was going to say a well-intended diminisher, meaning like their diminishing is
an intentional diminisher.
Yeah, an intentional diminisher. Like they created a crater that is not only deep in terms of the effect they have on people in their work, there is a collateral damage that's created in people's lives. I did a whole secondary round of research, really trying to understand how people deal with diminishers. And when I think I surveyed about 200 people, really trying to understand what happens when you are being diminished, I could see this toxic carryover into not just people's work lives and how they shut down, play it safe, hold back, all of this. It's the self-doubt. It's anxiety. It's depression. It's it's pervasive. So the accidental diminisher doesn't necessarily have that same kind of integral effect across people's like whole life experience.
Right.
But they cause people to hold back and be underutilized to the same degree as the intentional diminisher, or that hardened diminisher who's actually so busy absorbed in their own self they don't have time to think about the people on their team.
Yeah. So how do we help accidental diminishers?
Well, a lot of it comes from just helping people see that that human nature has it that we judge other people based on their actions, but we judge ourselves on our intentions, and that there's this lost in translation process is that that your intentions as a leader don't come through your behavior. And helping people see not only that other people can't see their intentions, they can only see their actions, unless they can somehow like divine it, intuit
right. Osmosis.
this, for the clairvoyant people on your staff, that people can't see it, but that also that there's something lost in translation, that things can go awry, that miscommunication, and to see what they look like through the eyes of their employees. And I think one of the things that's striking is when people realize that sometimes the things they do with their most noble intentions end up having the biggest diminishing effect.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. Feel free to confess at any moment, but I'll tell you a few. Like, I find that I actually have my greatest diminishing impact, not when I'm frustrated or mad or stressed.
Yeah.
Because in some ways I've learned to regulate that. Like, I have some basic emotional regulation. I don't necessarily like yell at people when I'm stressed. But when I'm my most excited, most passionate, like when I am fired up about something, I'm buzzed. I'm like, woo, we could do this, we could do that. And what about this? And I tend to take over. Yeah. And I end up like a wet blanket on others, sort of smothering the enthusiasm of someone else because I'm excited.
Interesting. Well, I was going to say, a related note, if you look at the accidental diminishers that you have laid out in your book, there are a lot that I don't necessarily relate to. I guess I'm lucky in that regard, but the big one for me is definitely the optimist. I'm very optimistic.
Give me both.
Enthusiastic, energetic. My friends will all tell you that I bring energy to everything I do. But that means if any challenge comes up, I'm like, oh, we got this, no problem. And I have no sympathy for people that are struggling with things when, I need to.
No whiners allowed.
Right. And I've gotten feedback from people who reported to me in the past. You don't really like understand the struggle we're going through. You just feel like everything can be done, no problem.
Right, because the complainers, they're like you're killing my vibe here.
Right,
like you're killing the feel good energy, and we don't tend to have sympathy for it. This is one that I struggle with as well, and it just seems. I mean, I read all the research on optimism. It seems like optimism should have this positive, hopeful effect on the team. And also, if you look at we know about the physiological benefits of optimism, sort of seeing the bright side. We know that the higher you get in organizations, the more we see optimists in these roles.
Yeah.
I think because you need, in some ways, a healthy detachment from reality to actually even get up and go to work some days in senior management, because you have to see these possibilities that don't yet exist. You can't get mired in reality, but yet it's actually deeply diminishing.
Yeah. Well, I would think, especially in the technology world, but really anywhere, most CEOs kind of have to be optimists, right? I mean, they've got to put on the face, go out to the market and say, oh, we're definitely going to do these things. I'm thinking of Apple with big launches, and I used to do a lot of work with Salesforce, and I know Mark Benioff would get up on stage and say, hey, we've just created this product, and everyone else is looking around going, we didn't make that yet. But he's like optimistic that
in our minds we did.
Right, exactly.
I used to work for Larry Ellison at Oracle, and it was the same. People would say, Larry's always right. It's just a matter of timing. We just haven't created it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's understanding what our intentions look like from other people. Like, how might this be received? Like, my own optimism is What does it look like to other people? She doesn't appreciate the struggle. She doesn't understand how hard it is.
Yeah.
And so it's learning to see what it looks like. Essentially, it's what the psychologists call perspective taking. And if anyone's read this research, I know Dan Pink popularized some of it in his book, To Sell is Human.
Yeah.
It's not in his Drive book, which is the one that probably most people are familiar with. It's in To Sell is Human, and he talks about perspective taking, which is the ability to see things through the eyes of others and consider other people's experience. It's a form of empathy that it is shown to go down with power and authority. Meaning when we're the underdogs, when we're the new ones in the organization, when we're the employees, like it's natural for us to say, I wonder what this looks like for somebody else.
Yeah.
When we're in a low power position. But when we're in the power position, it's so easy for us to say, here's what it looks like for me, and I want to impose that, share that with others. And so, a lot of multiplying is about countering hierarchy. It's about breaking down the disconnects that come when people have hierarchical relationships with each other.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the leaders and that, as you rise into those senior ranks, senior positions, in the book Multipliers, you talk about how multipliers tend to get twice as much intelligence on average out of their people than diminishers do. And that ultimately multiplier leaders are the most successful, both in developing their people and from a business perspective as well and getting results. And yet some people could look and say, well, what about CEOs, leaders, famous leaders like Steve Jobs or even a Larry Ellison, who on the outside kind of look like major diminishers in the way that they've acted. And I think you even say—
and perhaps on the inside too.
Perhaps on the inside too. So how do you explain their success if they are such diminishers? Are they anomalies, or are they doing other things that we're not seeing to be multipliers?
Wow. I think it's a complex story in there, and it's one I've spent a lot of time thinking about. And we do. Well, let me share a few perspectives on this. Let me go back to like my earliest quandary about this. So I get done with the book.
Yeah.
I feel good about the book. I feel like there's absolutely like a correlation between multiplier leadership and success of the team and the enterprise. And I haven't proven that the businesses do better, but there's a lot of things, a lot of indicators that
a lot of
up.
empirical. Yeah.
And so I share the book with a few people who I'm hoping will write an endorsement for the book. Carol Dweck was one of them. And I give the book to someone named John Doerr. He's a renowned venture capitalist.
Yeah.
And, he was at Kleiner Perkins, Coffin, Byers. And, this is someone who has invested in and started Sun Microsystems, Amazon, Google, and the list just goes on and on. So I know John just well enough to ask him to read the book and maybe consider an endorsement. I give it to him. He writes back, love the book, would love to write an endorsement. I'm thrilled. He sends me the endorsement, and it reads something to the effect of, what do all successful CEOs and CFOs have in common? They're multipliers. Blah, 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 blah. And I look at this and I panic. Now, I'm very grateful for his endorsement, but I'm looking at this going, that's not true.
Yeah.
That's not true. I live right here in the heart of Silicon Valley, and I can drive up Highway 101 and down Highway 280, and I can point to companies that I am sure are led by diminishing leaders.
Yeah.
So I can't put that on my book.
Yeah.
So I did what any reasonable author would do. I just edited this endorsement. And I'm like, okay, I got to make this kind of true.
Right.
True-ish enough. Like I wanted it to feel accurate. And
it's still his words though, not yours, right?
I know, but I felt like perhaps it was misleading. Anyway, it gave me angst. It gave me angst because of this tension that you just described is very real. And so I kind of massaged that endorsement. So I felt like, what, that's accurate. Sent it back to him. And I know John well enough to ask for an endorsement. I don't know him well enough to be editing his endorsement. That's what I learned. So he wrote back to me and he said, Liz, it's been my experience having taken a number of small founder-led companies and and grown them into large, successful enterprises is that the only ones that make it in the end are led by multipliers.
Hmm.
And then he said, my endorsement stands as is.
Interesting.
John. I'm like, he sees something that I don't see.
Hmm.
What is that he doesn't see? And I think what he sees is that, you might be able to start a company with genius. But in the end, you need leaders who are genius makers. You get to the point where the organization is too complex for any one person to know. Now, there are probably some leaders who have such incredible levels of genius that they can afford to kind of underutilize the intelligence of others. Like, there are probably a few of those. Maybe Steve Jobs was one of these leaders, but there are not a lot of them. Right. And I do believe that there probably are some people who are so incredibly brilliant and insightful and kind of see around corners that their intellectual will can be imposed on an organization. But there are not a lot of them. So if you're not Steve Jobs, like don't play the Steve Jobs card in how you lead. And there are times when organizations can draw more singularly on certain leaders. And there are market conditions where, like, a strong-headed leader does extremely well. Software is full of them. Like, I come out of the software world. If you can go out there and get an install base fast, and particularly if it's enterprise critical technology, the switching costs are so great that it ends up creating these kind of pseudo-monopolistic environments where you don't see the effect of intelligence lost. Like, in some ways, the water level's so high you don't see the rocks. And there's one other dynamic I would throw in there, and I'm sure, Andy, you've got thoughts on this as well, is that you do see this really interesting hybrid kind of profile in founder-led organizations, these founder CEO types. And you mentioned Steve Jobs. We could go there. Larry Ellison's one of my favorite. Although people are like, oh, Larry Ellison must be one of these diminishers in your book.
Yeah.
Not at all. Not for me.
Yeah.
For me, he was an incredible multiplier. And one of my colleagues at Oracle said, with Larry, who's known for being kind of strong-willed and mercurial, is they said, if he trusted you, there was no greater multiplier.
Hmm.
And often what you see is these kind of leaders tend to have a strong multiplier presence in a smaller sphere, kind of like in their inner circle.
Right.
Not that I was in Larry's inner circle, but that with people they know and trust. Yep. They're like amazing leaders. Like, hey, you know what? Here's what I need you to do. I back you. You go figure this out. They're incredible challengers. But when it comes to a broad group of people where they don't know you, they don't necessarily hold those same assumptions, or you get these mixed bags like Steve Jobs, who people could point to his behavior and say, oh, I see a lot of diminishing properties.
If they have a good lieutenant, like Steve Jobs had Tim Cook, who was running operations, and of course now is the CEO, who might have been more of a multiplier to the people and could, take care of the masses, where Steve had his trusted inner circle. He may have been, and I imagine the same thing is the same with Jeff Bezos, who some could say, oh, he's, that way as well. And then it's a matter of opinion. There have been plenty of articles about the toxic culture of Amazon, and then everybody rose up and said, no, we love working here, right? There's just different perspectives, and the culture might fit different people as well.
Absolutely. And I think what you just described is what John Doerr was capturing, which is the only ones that make it in the end are led by multipliers. Now, it could be that CEO, that founder CEO type, that genius type, evolves and changes.
Right.
That might be a Bill Gates story. But it could be that the way that they evolve is not that they themselves change their nature or their management style, is they surround themselves with people who shore that up. Tim Cook is very much a multiplier in how he led. I had just this incredible blessing to get to do a lot of coaching work for Tim for his executives as I was writing the book. And he's a brilliant example of someone who brings out the best in everyone, and actually someone with a hard edge as well, not just with this kind of gentlemanly charm and appreciation for others, but
well, that was one of your surprising revelations in the book as well, is that multipliers do have a hard edge. A lot of them do, right?
They do, and that's why some of these hard-edged leaders look like diminishers, but they're hard-edged multipliers. And often you get these hybrid profiles like a Steve Jobs, who had these diminishing properties. Yeah, he could micromanage, really well, and he had some tyrannical moments and was hot-headed. But now, if you look at the profile of these multiplier leaders, like Steve was absolutely a talent magnet, as is Bezos. Like, people would say, man, I'd work for him anytime, anywhere.
Yeah.
Steve was a challenger. There's those stories of him like staring people down. Like, if I just look at you long enough, you'll figure out that this ridiculous thing I'm asking you to do is humanly possible, and it's possible for you. And I'm just going to keep staring at you until you decide you can do it. Like, it's a real twisted, in some ways, a little bit of a dark approach to a challenger.
Yeah. And so, like you said, a lot of them were talent magnets anyway. Like, people wanted to go work for them, and probably liberators to some extent as well, right? I mean, they are driving people and giving them freedom once they convince them that they can go do these things to go out and create new products and build stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's important to distinguish, like, I had to separate these out, is that, it's not that like multipliers are good, nice people and diminishers are bad, evil people. Like, one of the most fascinating things is to go into organizations where the nice factor in a culture has had a deeply diminishing impact. Because people don't talk straight. People don't ask people to do hard things. Like, they love people up. Oh, Liz, we appreciate you. We love you.
Yeah.
But people feel underutilized. Like, nobody's asking me to do something hard. Nobody's letting me suffer. Like, I get rescued too quickly, or nobody's telling me the truth. Nobody's giving me the information I need to calibrate and to change and adjust. And so, we see nice diminishers and we see some tough hombres in multiplier roles.
Yeah, no doubt, because multipliers, I mean, as you say in the book, when you talk about the characteristics of multipliers versus diminishers, and multipliers are challengers, right? They challenge people to do more than they think they're capable of. And diminishers can, if they're not doing that, then they're not getting the most intelligence out of their people. Maybe they're just being nice and just letting them, agreeing with them, or, not really challenging them or wanting to rock the boat or help them realize that they could be doing more.
Yeah. And maybe this is too autobiographical in my own experience, but when I look at my multipliers, when I make my list of the people who really got the best work out of me, none of them niced their way into this. Most of them were people I were just a little bit afraid of. Not retribution, not what are they going to do to me. I never felt unsafe. I just would have done anything not to disappoint them.
Yeah.
But these were not cupcakes and kisses kinds of leaders. At least mine are. But maybe I am sick and twisted, And I'm not encouraging anyone to artificially adopt some tough, demanding style. Like, if that's not you, like, you're not pulling that off.
You've got to be yourself, but you've also got to be willing to challenge people as well. So I want to ask you, I'm assuming that a lot of my listeners who are in the talent development space have read your book, or at least familiar with the work. And they might say, okay, this is great. How do I create more of a multiplier culture in my organization?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it starts with this accidental diminisher. The path does not look like, gee, here's diminishing behavior, let's root that out. Here's multiplying behavior, let's inculcate that. Let's educate people. Let's build those skills. Let's put the posters on the wall, so to speak. That is not the path. It's far more nuanced than that. It's going back to this question, Andy, you asked, and I feel like I got sidetracked. I sidetracked myself frequently. It's about treating the accidental diminisher. Like what I have learned as an educator and as a research on this is the path of learning is the accidental diminisher path. Because very few people can live up to this like ideal of multiplier leader. All of us have our own diminishing tendencies. And very few people really want to confront like, oh, I'm a diminisher. Like, oh, I'm going to sign up for the class for the diminishing managers. Most of us don't want to do that, but I have really not found a leader who isn't interested in exploring his or her own accidental diminisher tendencies. And boy, I wish I could claim that I had somehow planned this out. I had contrived this, conceived of it like that this was some clever way to pull people in. It wasn't. I just noticed that once it's accidental, the resistance is gone. And I've also learned, so it's helping people see their accidental diminisher tendencies and to either put in place quick workarounds, like, hey, if you're an idea guy, like keep a piece of paper with you. And when you're in meetings and you have ideas, write them down. I call it my big girl list, like my holding tank, my executive filter that says, do not just spout ideas. I ask myself a simple question because I'm a massive idea guy. Liz, do you want the people who are working on your team to stop what they're doing and start working on your idea right now?
Yeah, because they will.
Because they will.
Yeah.
And it's why these people give whiplash to others in their organization and why they're so diminishing, because people go home going, well, I've like been running around all day, but I'm not making any progress. Yeah. Like I'm at the whim of Liz's creative mind.
I've worked for an idea guy and I put together so many reports and did so many things that then he did nothing with. And I was like, why? I'm always like, why did I do that? He's just always throwing out ideas and I'm running around and doing stuff.
And you learn to basically stay in neutral because you're not going to go anywhere. So it's finding little workarounds. Like my little workaround is I ask myself, do you want people to work on that? 99% of the time it's no. Okay, write it down. Save it for when you are ready to ask people to start working on this. Simple workarounds or kind of some bigger learning experiments. And for those who have the book, I think it's on page 208 and 209 of the book. Now, if you don't have the book and you don't really want to read the book or you don't want to buy the book or what have you, I think we have this little 2-pager chart on the book's website. To me, like this boils down so much of the book onto 2 pages that I could not.
Page 208, you nailed it.
The only reason I know this, I don't want anyone to think like I have some kind of weird photographic memory, is that when the second edition of the book came out and I'm opening it up and I know that this chart is like the piece de resistance of the book. And I'm flipping through the book, this new little baby that's been born, and I look at it and there's only one thing wrong with the print job. And that's this chart. They printed 2 left sides or 2 right sides. And so like the most important part of the book was wrong. So those, and some of you who are listening might have ordered or received one of the early copies of the second edition. It had an insert, an errata page that corrected this. So that's why I know that. But you can also get it on our website. I think we put it up there.
Yeah, and this is the minimizing your accidental diminisher tendencies. So you're saying, going back to the question of how do I create more of a multiplier culture, it's keeping in mind that most people don't come to work planning on being diminishers, and then to help them realize what those diminisher tendencies are and help them improve those. Because the best leaders, going back to mindset, if you have a growth mindset, you believe that you can improve in anything. You're always open to feedback and improvement. Now, a lot of people aren't that way. They take it personally and can get defensive. But for the ones that are and do really truly do want to improve, it is an accident, and you can help them by showing them where they are diminishing their people.
Help them build the awareness of it, see how things get screwed up in translation, help with little workarounds, tips, or some of the learning experiments like, hey, try this, try shifting out of the mode of telling and ask. This is definitely on the path to building a multiplier culture. The other thing is it's about conversation. One of the things I've learned is that the work I do and the work that other authors do, Andy, I'm looking at your bookshelf there, and I'm seeing some books that are familiar and, other authors I know and respect. And I was at a gathering of a bunch of management authors, and the observation I shared is, we are corporate linguists in essence. Like, I think the contribution I've made is not necessarily the competency model, like here's what multipliers do and the skills. It's creating a language that people can discuss what has previously been undiscussable. I think it's one of the great pieces of work that Kim Scott has done, which she's created a framework and a language that allows people to talk about things that have been hard to talk about. And language, when you look at what culture is in its purest sense, like in a society, it's like there's not a common language, and we have all these languages in the world. They develop around shared values and culture. So it's create a language that people can discuss the undiscussables, where you can tell your boss, like, hey, you know what? I don't need to be rescued.
Yeah.
Like, nobody wants to tell their boss to back off and quit micromanaging.
But if they were more free to have those conversations and give feedback, you're going to have a better culture and people that are getting more done.
Right. And when you have a language, let's say I'm working for you, Andy, and you're coming in, you see me struggling and suffering, and out of the kindness of your heart, you come in to help. That shared language allows me to say, hey, Andy, I don't need a rescue. I'm going to get this done. I've got ownership over this. I'll come to you if I need help, but let me get this thing across the finish line. Or to say, whoa, Andy, you are in optimist mode. Like, you are nothing but upside, which gives me the unfortunate job of being like Debbie Downer, Ms. Downside. And you know what, Andy, that sucks. And so it's having this language, and also I think having a sense of humor about it. Which it's hard to have a sense of humor about our foibles when it's like, oh, you're a diminisher, you're a multiplier, you're not living up to our corporate values. But when we can laugh at what we do with the best of intentions, that actually is quite ineffective. It allows us, that little bit of levity, I think, allows us to tackle the gravitas of these issues of like, hey, I'm coming to work every day.
Yeah.
I can't remember that little soundbite you pulled from the book. But it's like, I'm coming to work every day.
Great work. Yeah.
I want to do great work, and I want to use all my mind, and I actually want to I want to share it. I want to give it freely, but you're like killing my vibe.
Yeah. I want to ask you, before we finish, people listening that are, again, like trying to create more of a multiplier culture, and they're saying, okay, I need to go help my accidental diminishers, and maybe that's spending time with them or putting a program in place or whatever it is. What's the business case for making the effort to create more of a multiplier culture? Did you find that multipliers do get better business results in the end?
No, I didn't find that, but I did not find that. So I don't know, maybe out of some accurately formed humility, don't know that I could actually pull off that research project. Like, if I could convince my friend Jim Collins to do it with me, I would go for it. I've actually kind of hinted at Jim a little bit on this, but I think he's perfect. But it's a massive study with so many variables. Like, how do you really establish cause and effect?
If you help me get Jim Collins on the podcast, I'll be happy to help you persuade him.
I know, we're totally like at a double team him.
Right.
He's my hero. He's my research hero.
Yeah.
And he's actually one of the people who inspired me to go do this work for Multipliers, because he was so rigorous in his research and so open and transparent in his research process. I thought, I can do the same kind of comparison study. So I have not attempted it. And one of the reasons I haven't is, I think, lack of skill and capability on my part, which usually doesn't hold me back. I'm usually like, okay, I'll figure it out as I go. Yeah. But I really haven't run into organizations who don't, at one level, intuitively believe this. Like, most organizations, by the time I'm visiting them, they've already decided that the world is changing and the command and control form of leadership doesn't cut it. And that, whether it's their growth agenda, their innovation agenda, their inclusion agenda, like their talent talent acquisition strategy
Yeah.
necessitates a certain way of leading. So I haven't found it to be a deal breaker.
But it's easy to make the jump that if you're getting twice as much intelligence out of your people, then they're going to be more efficient, more effective, more productive. They're going to come up with new ideas, and the business is going to be probably more innovative, and therefore we're going to get better results. I mean, maybe you don't have the hard and fast evidence, but I think it's pretty fair to say.
Well, and it's probably fair to say that there are, I don't know, some people who are watching or listening this who don't work in organizations where that belief is a prima facie assumption, or like a commonly or widely held belief. So there are some people who are really up against senior leadership or stakeholders who don't necessarily see that relationship. My guess is most do, but what I'm saying is my heart goes out for the people who are trying to make that case.
Yeah.
And hitting a wall.
You mentioned a few, we've mentioned a few authors like Harold Dweck and Jim Collins. When it comes to the world of talent development and developing great leaders, besides those books and your own, is there any other book or books that you highly recommend or have made an impact on you?
I'm looking at my bookshelf over here. I'll tell you an unlikely one. Ed Catmull's book, Creativity, Inc. is one I love. And I think it speaks so much to not just innovation, but to talent management, talent development strategies. I kind of envy him, not for getting to run Pixar, but I'm like, how did he in one book do what it took me 2 books to do, like Multipliers and Rookie Smarts? And he nails it. I found that to be extremely helpful. I think Laszlo Bock, his book Work Rules, that I imagine a lot of people listening, he nails something for us that describes the future of talent management and talent development. I think he, and the book is so well written, and people should read it if for nothing more than the pancake recipe in the footnotes. If you read the book and you missed the pancake recipe, go back and find that in the footnotes. I just actually yesterday spoke with Kim Scott, who I think is adding all sorts of layers of texture to what does it take to get people to perform at their best. And I think she offers incredible thinking. She's got this phenomenally interesting background. I'm sure most people are familiar with her book, Radical Candor. I'm writing a book. I'll tell you what's on my reading list I haven't read yet, but I'm very excited to read, is the book Insight. Now, I bet a bunch of people listening have already read this. And let me see, I actually just put it in my bag. Because that means, I am. It's in my bag, and when it actually goes in my briefcase, that means I'm going to read it because it's Tasha Urrich's book, Insight: The Surprising Truth About How Others See Us, How We See Ourselves, and Why the Answers Matter More Than We Think. And Tasha, I think, has done some really great work there. I'm familiar with the ideas, but haven't read the book yet. And I love the work Amy Edmondson is doing at Harvard with emotional safety and the impact it's having on teams and people's ability to take risks and innovate. Do we want more?
I think we're good at this point, and people are I hope people are frantically writing this down. We'll put all of these in the show notes.
Can I add one more?
Okay, all right, one more. If you
this is Dolly Chugg's book, The Person You Mean to Be. I got a chance to read that and write an endorsement for it. It's a delightful book. So what she does is, the book is written for those who are believers in the dynamic of unconscious bias, but who really want to be a colleague or a boss or a friend who really sees and uses other people's capability well. And it's a set of it's an explanation for why we tend to miss that and what we can do to really be the boss, the colleague, the person that we mean to be. Yeah. And she's got a wonderful TED Talk.
And doesn't that just speak to what we talked about with accidental diminishers who don't show up? They mean to be great leaders. They mean to get results. They mean to help their people. They're not trying to diminish them, but it just happens accidentally.
Well, there's much more we could talk about, but those are just a few of, as I'm looking at my shelf, that I have really learned from.
A couple more questions for you. What are there any trends that you're paying attention to that you think are, really big or hot or impacting talent development today?
Well, this is where my has-been status in the talent management industry gets up, because it's not like something I'm actively tracking, other than the obvious things of, this tension between deep learning and bite-sized learning. Deep, immersive, peer-based, emotionally rich kinds of learning experiences that tend to create these big ahas, these breakthroughs, the relationships we need to sustain behavioral change and transform, versus, hey, I just need to know. I need a tip. Help me right now. That's one that I'm continuing to explore, certainly online learning versus in-person learning. Interestingly, I have, I'm a little bit of a in-person deep learning bigot. I'm a little bit oriented this way, but I just got done releasing kind of some new programs, all on webinar series. And I found that it was not only as good, I found in so many of the indicators that we're looking at, it was far superior to in-person learning. And that's one. I'll tell you one of the, I don't know that this is a trend for anyone else but me. It's a trend, it's an N of one. So it's hardly a trend, but here's what I'm paying a lot of attention to is, as organizations are looking to build culture and transform, our paradigm, I don't know, for the last couple decades has been look to our leaders for in the intervention. Tell the leaders the culture we're kind of build a set of leadership skills, build a set of leadership values, train your leaders, get your arms around a leader, because leadership matters. And if you can get the leaders to do a certain set of things, the organization will follow. And in some ways, I'm not only questioning that, I'm trying to kind of call BS on that a little bit. And I've been very involved in this, and I do a lot of that work, and I'm starting to ask the question of, if you really want to shape a culture, and in the lens that I look at this through is, what creates a high contribution culture? Because people contact me and say, hey, we want to build multiplier leaders, or we want a multiplier culture. I'm like, well, that got my attention, yes, but that's not actually what you really want. Nobody really wants multiplier leaders or a multiplier culture. What they want is they want an environment where people can contribute at their fullest. I call that a high contribution culture. And leadership is only one lever. And I think there's actually a lot of gain to be made by going to the talent side of the equation. Like, what is it that contributors need to do in how they show up and how they engage and how they interact with their leaders? And I suspect that it actually might be a more powerful lever.
Last question for you, Liz, as someone who has been, was on the inside for many years, building a talent development career, building a university at a major tech company. For people listening who are earlier in their career or looking for ways to accelerate their career in talent development, what is some additional advice you would give them?
Well, I'll share the advice that I was given. One was from Ed Musselwhite, which is, if you want to teach people how to be good leaders and managers, go learn how to do that yourself. I feel like I can, as I watch people do that work, I can really see those who have made the investment and have done the work themselves. The second thing is, let go of your own agenda and go work on the agenda of the organization. When maybe it was a year into Oracle, and the organization was shifting, and I was kind of looking for a new job inside the organization. I went to interview with my would-be boss, this was an organization that ended up starting the university. And it would be like my boss's boss, my vice president. I'm in this interview and I'm telling him what I want to do. Hey, here's what I think we need. And, it's management curriculum, and I can do this and I can help with this. And like, here's what I'm passionate about. Mm-hmm. I was maybe channeling my inner millennial before there were millennials. And I'm like, woo, here's what I can do for you, which seems like it makes some sense, right?
Yep.
And he's like, that's great, Liz. Like, yay for you. But the problem we have is that we're hiring, technologists by the thousands. And what we really need is to not help them be better leaders. What we really need is we need to teach them Oracle software. So what would be great is if you could help your boss figure out that problem. That's not what I wanted to do, but it was what needed to be done. And so I said, okay, I hear what you're saying to me, and I'm not so dumb that I would not figure out what's important and go make myself useful and what's important. And so I did, and I became I taught programming, and I taught programming to people who were coming out of like MIT and Caltech, Carnegie Mellon with degrees, like bachelor's and master's and PhDs in like electrical engineering, computer science, and even machine learning and all of this. And I developed a love for it. And, I've learned to sublimate some of my own agenda and go work on what's important for the company. And I find that like when you become the how to the what, like you earn a right to help shape the what. Basically it's like find out what's important and go make yourself useful.
Yeah.
And it's rarely what you want to do. Think about it. Like when I'm having a party at my house and, one of my family members comes in, sees me frantic, and they're like, hey, what can I do to help? I'm like, oh, you can do that. They're like, I don't want to do that. I want to do that. I'm like, well, that's not really what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And the kind of people who are going to come in and say, no, really what needs to be done. And I will go do that.
Yeah.
They become your go-to people.
Yeah. When they're like, I would really love to help you cook. And you're like, I have all the food I need. I need someone to wash dishes right now.
Yeah. Right now I need someone to wash dishes or fill glasses with water or something.
Yeah.
But I was taught that, I think, just slightly against my will, but it changed the way that I work. Like find out what the agenda is and go work on that agenda.
Go add value and get involved and get that experience so that you're more qualified to go teach people later. It's great advice. I like it. Liz, for anybody listening that wants to find out more about you and what you do, get the book, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, we've got information and resources about the book on the book's website. So multipliersbooks.com, because there's actually several versions, and there's a couple Multipliers books. So you can go there. You can get information about, I guess, me and my company, the Wiseman Group, at thewisemangroup.com. And we're thewisemangroup.com, not wisemangroup.com, because that's an interior design firm, which I guarantee you is more interesting than our website. But we're at thewisemangroup.com, and then I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn and Twitter and all of that.
Yep, cool. I've seen you posting on there. I've tagged you in some stuff on Multipliers as well. And Liz, it has been an absolute honor to have you on. I really appreciate you spending the time to share some of your insights and experience and wisdom. And I also want to honor you because I feel like you are very accomplished. You've done all this with these best-selling books and multiple versions and helped so many companies. And you are so authentic and honest and open about your experience and what's working and what's not and what you're still not even sure about. And I think people really appreciate that. So, and I know I really appreciate that. So thank you so much for coming on and being open and honest in who you are.
Well, thank you. That's such a eloquent way to say, Liz, you are scrappy and messy, which I am. I don't know another way to be, but thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing and for a great conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Liz. Take care.